Hi everyone and welcome to the first live stream this year. Happy New Year. I hope you got everything you wanted for Christmas and you're all keen for a new year of modelling. I know I had 2 weeks break off. I did 10 days without really doing social media and it felt like a huge rest. So I've come back bubbling with new ideas and concepts and a determination to finish off some old projects I haven't looked at in years. More about those in a minute though. So welcome to everybody in chat and who's listening live, and if you listen later. I rarely get to live streams live. They always seem to be the wrong time, so don't feel guilty at all. And welcome to everybody. I'm not going to manage to get through all the names. There's just so many on there, but it's brilliant to see you all. And it's interesting to see what people say in the chat sometimes. So hopefully I'll keep up with that. In the meanwhile, I thought I'd spend the first, I've got an hour and 35 of Dagobah. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about where we've got to in Dagobah, see what the chat says, and then catch up. But I noticed the stream, it was really difficult at the beginning. It just kept falling out. And I think it's quite laggy at times. And the stream's a good sort of 30 seconds, 40 seconds behind me. So I'll always be a little bit ahead of you. Here we go. So let us know what you got for Christmas if it was really exciting. Put it in the chat and let's see who got the most exciting present. I got an Apple Watch, a new one. I had one. I've got a new one. Can you see that? Yep. Because my old one it just ran out of charge occasionally. And I do love my Apple Watch. So Mickey is going to be stamping his little foot. Oops, I've got to work out how to get that in camera. Stamping his little foot all the way through. There we go, telling me the time. So that was my big present this year. Other than that, I didn't really get modelling stuff, but I did get some books, including The Art of Halo Infinite and a book on decrepit Japan. But let's see if chat has caught up with me and see what you all got. I got epoxy sculpt and resin, so I'm happy, says Vez. That would be really good. That would definitely be really, really good. I've got some epoxy sculpt. I've never used it, I have to say. Okay. Mark got the original Hornby Intercity 125 train set from the 80s in swallow livery. Wow. I remember catching those. That shows my age, doesn't it? That was really cool. And Sparky got 3 weeks off work and all spent in the train shed. That's great. It's funny, as soon as you do modelling for your job, you're craving actually having 10 days off. I was like, what do I do with myself? What do I do? Because modelling is also my hobby. So I played video games. I played Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy. You're glad to know I saved the galaxy several times. It was great fun. It's just a fun game, apart from getting stuck at one point. But it's a really fun game. So I played that through and it took most of the time. And that was really it. Didn't do much else. Just chilled, watched some TV, caught up on things, you know. Usual break stuff. Okay, Digger got cash and chocolate. That's good. Chocolate's always a winner for me. It's one of my favourites. And Timber's gone backwards to the 1980s LED watches that you have to press a button to see the time. I was thinking the other day about falling in whilst punting. Long story. It was the day I got my results and graduated, well, not graduated, but got my results. And we went punting and I fell in. And I remember thinking back to days when you fell in and your watch got wet. That was it. That was it for the watch. It would break completely. So thankfully, most watches are now waterproof. But still, Tamsin got to what he really wanted for Christmas. He got to spend it with his family for the first time since 2019. Oh, that's really good. Yeah, it's been an odd couple of years, so I'm glad you finally got to spend some time with them. Tim got a Switch and some box. Okay, whatever they are. That's good. Books, hopefully. Actually, put the O back in. And Norman got a Fox Valley Milwaukee Road Hiawatha Loco and matching car set. Oh, beautiful. Really, really nice. That is nice. Fox Valley do some great stuff. So, coming up, I mentioned I've got a couple of projects that have come off the backlog. So I thought I'd just say where we are and keep seeing what people have got for Christmas. So John just said he got his second KR Mould GT3 in BR Blue livery. Sounds good. And Stephen got a smaller tablet for using when flying the gyrocopter to help monitor air traffic. That sounds very good. Wow. Tamsin is a she. Sorry. I'm so used to everybody being he's. I really apologise. I'm so sorry. Anyway, sorry. The thing I wanted to talk about, just lost it because I called her. Anyway, moving on. The thing I wanted to talk about was one of the projects that is crawling off my... Well, actually, it went in the skip. Let's just be honest. The project actually went in next door's skip. I've got builders next door. This lot started January last year on this side. As soon as they'd finished, that lot started and they're still going. So I've had a year of building work, which is great when you're voicing over videos. This lot's worse because they're attached to me. And so when they make loads of bangs, it is noisy. But, you know, he bangs occasionally. He's on roofing at the moment. But he has a skip and he's a very nice guy. And he drilled a hole in my wall for me, one of the big ones for a vent for my... I put a vent out there for my airbrush booth because it wasn't clearing the air. And I discovered it wasn't clearing it at all when I used it last time, and it had come off at the back. So it's now hot glued to death. So hopefully it's all staying together. And it just makes it so much better because I'm spraying lacquers and spray cans and things like that this time of year. And you really need to make sure that gets out of your house as quickly as possible. So anyway, back to Port de Norwich. So Port de Norwich is something I started talking to Steve Flint in the Great Model Railway Challenge the first year. So was that 2017? Probably, maybe 2018. And I started this layout. It's based on a slate port in Wales, North Wales. And I'll say a lot more about it when we actually start it, because that's going to be the next live stream, is Port de Norwich, the project. So Dagobah I've done the X-Wing. All I've got left to do now is the water. And that's not that much. Put the backdrops on and play around with some fog. And I'll put the fog video out probably on YouTube and I'll just have a play. So it'll be quite a quick amount of work left to do. I say that, but it never is. It always takes you longer than you think. So that will be going on in the background. And then I'll start Port de Norwich. I've ordered some laser cut baseboards and we'll start talking about that in March. So that will be the plan so far. So next time is our last Dagobah swamp, and then we'll be looking at an atmospheric, and we're talking grey, drizzly feel. It's going to be a slice of North Wales in miserable weather. And my mum's from South Wales. I know Welsh miserable weather. It is really miserable. It just damps in the air. So that's what I'm looking for. That's the feel I'm going for. So what time is it? 12. Let's see who else got exciting stuff. I hope the guy who gave you the grief over the mini caffee's got a sense of humour from Santa. Some people never get that sense of humour. I'm sorry, Stephen. It just, it just never happens. But yeah, it's fine. You get used to it. Somebody wrote, though, this made me laugh. It's on YouTube. Somebody wrote on my Clone Wars diorama that Star Wars modelling was for men and you and other women shouldn't do it. I was like, really? Wow. So Princess Leia was a woman. She was in Star Wars. So obviously, you know, they do want women in Star Wars. It just made me laugh. People actually do write that. Thankfully, it's really rare. The modelling community, the scale modelling community, is a really, really nice community. I hear of other people getting loads of grief. I rarely get that grief, and I rarely get any problems. So, yeah. But it just made me laugh. I mean, who writes to a complete stranger and tells them that women shouldn't model Star Wars? Oh, well, bless. I've got this one going at the moment. Don't tell him. He probably hasn't noticed there's a live stream on Star Wars every month. Right. So, yeah, Tamsin, someone walked up to me once and said, hate the mini Cathys, don't do them. And it was a lot of split grief. I mean, a lot of people didn't like them. They were very divisive. So I've dropped them. They also took time, and I wanted to spend the time on the modelling, not on me prancing around my bedroom with a green screen behind me. And over time, you just try different things and move on, don't you? So this time, when I recorded it, you won't see it in this because I've edited them out, but every time I did a change on the X-Wing, I did a like in front of it, and I'm going to see if when I do the final one, because I will edit this down for YouTube into a sort of 12-minute video, probably a 10-12-minute video, so it'll be quite short, maybe 18 if it a push. And I thought to speed things up, I might just say, oh, I painted it, click, I painted this, click, you know, just things like that to make it look a bit faster. Because at the end of the day, a lot of 3D printing is fairly boring to watch on video. Oh, Anita got some 1, 2, 3 blocks. I love my 1, 2, 3 blocks. I saw somebody the other day had something like 3, 4, 5 blocks. I was like, oh, I'm jealous. He's got bigger ones. So I might have to look some of those out as well. Yeah, definitely. And paving bricks is the other thing I used to use a lot of because they're very cheap. I got them from somebody who's having spare paving bricks, probably my mum actually. DRNG Lover 68 got a filament printer. That's brilliant. I've been using mine a lot. One of the projects I also pulled off the backlog was my Titanfall helmet. Someone produced a screen accurate version. It's my favourite game, Titanfall 2. Love that campaign. It's really short. I will just rave about it for hours. It is my all-time favourite campaign. I love the artwork. I love the story. I love the game mechanics. Just everything about it I love. So I'm doing the helmet. I'm going to do a cosplay this year. I may not take it anywhere, but I might take it in November to the local Comic-Con in Birmingham. So we'll see. It's something like, I don't know, MCM or something. We'll see how far I get on it with time, because there's other big changes coming up. Who else got what? And then I'll put the video to go. Thanks, Vez. I do like Star Wars. They're actually my best ever videos on my channel, are all the Star Wars ones. So I think it's interesting what people want to watch. Star Wars is definitely a winner. Lo-Fi Guy got brilliant trail walking shoes for Christmas. They're so nice. I don't want to use them. I know that feeling. I'm like, I don't want to wear this jumper whenever I'm modelling, just in case I get something on it. Yeah, well, I'm glad, Brian, you like the mini Cathys. And yeah, Stephen, it's funny. Just pull yourself together. Right, I'm going to click onto the movie so it can go in the background of what I've been doing. I've actually spent a full week on this, but the first bit was from the end of last year. It was the end of the last video. And if you recall back to the previous live stream, I said the backdrop didn't go well. I missed out the 4 versions in between this and that because like nothing happened. So these are the same bits of one backdrops that I painted last time, being repainted. And this time I used oil paints. Why? I couldn't get the acrylics to merge and fade properly. If I thinned them, they just didn't look right. And it wasn't working. So I went with the oil paints. I know oil paints will work. And I'd recently bought a load to do weathering with. I still use my enamels because they're there and they're really easy to use. But oil paints, you can get a wider range of colours in than the enamels. So if you're weathering something that's yellow or red or blue or green, it's easier to put those faded colours in. So I really like oil paints, and they're cheap compared to some of the other things. And you can throw white spirit on them and use them as washes, and I've been doing that as well. So this is just sludgy blues, and it's supposed to be trees. So the light sections is the light between the trees, and the dark section is the trees, and it's going to go on behind it. So backdrops for a bit. And it's interesting. Oil paint is one I hadn't really thought much about, and I noticed Pele Soberg he did a sky once, and I think he used oil paints because they took a long time, so he could blend them, and he did white at the bottom and dark blue at the top with different colours in between, and then blended them. So I'm thinking maybe I should use oil paints more. If you use oil paints a lot, let me know. And what do you use them for when you're modelling, other than maybe painting a backdrop? Do you use them for weathering at all? If you don't, check out Rinaldi Studio Press. He does a lot of live streams, and Michael Rinaldi does some beautiful work with weathering with oils. And he was a real inspiration for me spending a lot of money on oils, and then discovering I actually had some of them still in the cupboard. So I now have a lot of oils in the same colours. It's great. Check first. So, are you heading to any model railway fairs at all this year, Kathy asked Mark. I don't know. I will probably always do Worley. I have a change coming up. So I think my weekends, which are currently just kind of filled with catching up with stuff I didn't get around to modelling in the week, might become a bit busier. But I would like to get out and see people again. I just think it depends what shows are on and when. We'll just have to see how it goes. I suspect the world we're living in now will get looser and freer as we go through the year. Let's just hope that happens. John Farron asked, any more Tomb Raider builds? Yes, I've just finished one actually. I did it mostly last year and I finished it off this year. And it's a jungle waterfall with Tomb Raider hanging on at the top of the waterfall. Well, changed to pink. And it's actually, I really like it. I've done Pirates of the Caribbean and that, and I prefer the jungle waterfall. Pirates will be up next. It will probably be out in February because I'm spacing them because of the big change that's coming up. And I'm basically going into full-time employment doing a creative job, and they're happy for me to carry on doing my YouTube. Obviously, it's going to take loads of hours out of the week. So yeah, my modelling will change. I will still do the live streams, but it may be the normal YouTube videos that disappear most. So you may not have noticed, but we are now onto the X-Wing. It's a great model actually. It's a 64th scale model. I printed it 1/48 because, well, I'm modelling a 1/48 scene, and I wanted a nice big enough Luke and Yoda, especially because he's so diddy, and R2-D2 that you could see them. So 1/48 was a scale for them. This ends up quite big, which is great. The downside with 3D printing something that's larger is that sometimes you lose detail because they didn't put as much detail in. The biggest problem was actually the wings had stepped ridges on them where the 3D print layer lines were, which wasn't great. I covered it in weed. In fact, for the whole build, I was like, it's getting covered in weed, not a problem. Oh, this is going to get covered in weed, it's not a problem. So it was a very free build in some ways. I even hand painted something, we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's a great, I've put the link in the live stream description for the Thingiverse file. You can actually, if you print it, probably in filament rather than resin, some of the tolerances didn't work that well. I had to sand quite a bit to get some of the engine cowlings in, and they slide in. And I didn't print the inner gubbins, I made one up to hold it together. But it's actually one where you can open and close it, and I would be tempted to print it in filament for a child to play with because it's a great model. It's got 3 blocks instead of about 5 or 6, whatever Luke's actually got on his wings, and that's about it really. Some of the markings are probably, the boxes are probably not for the purist, but I thought it was brilliant. I was really, really pleased with it. And as you can see, there's a lot of cleanup. The one thing didn't print, which was the base of one of those sticky out bits at the top left, which are the guns. One of those didn't print the little spigot that holds it in, and I noticed that when it's glued on it looks a little wonky, but all the rest of them are fine, and it printed really well. Not too many supports to clean up. I was actually really pleased. Obviously I hollowed it for ease, and I printed the wings together. In Blender I put them in and joined them up and printed them together as one piece, which just made it quicker for me. What I didn't want to do was put it all together because it would need hollowing, and I wasn't sure which bits were structurally attached where sometimes on the file. So I was like, I'll do it, the bit in the middle, when I've sorted it. It took me 3 attempts to get the right size for the internal gubbins. So I need to get out my t-shirt that says measure, measure, cut, as opposed to measure, cut, cut, cut. Okay, so Norm's excited, we've got the movie up. Tim, I have a selection of modelling clothes that I don't mind getting covered in rubbish. I'm being polite just in case, I'd normally say that word. Anything else doesn't go over near paint and glue. I have just the jeans I've been having for years and sweatshirts. You'll see I'm normally in a sweatshirt in all my videos. Some of them are really quite brown under the cuffs now. I would definitely never model in nice clothes, which means, because I model every day, I spent 2 years in just jeans and sweatshirts. So over Christmas, Mum bought me this jumper and she bought me 2 others, and I'm trying at weekends now to perhaps do more computer-based stuff and actually wear clothes other than modelling clothes. I used to live in skirts and jackets and jumpers at work and high heels. I've got a cupboard, 2 cupboards full of high heels I don't wear now. It's like I don't want to throw them out because they're expensive shoes and I used to wear them a lot, and you never know what's going to happen in the future. But I just don't wear any of the clothes. I've got wardrobes of very nice office clothes. One of the problems with becoming a creative, now I'll probably always just wear jeans. Tamsin's gifts to herself were 28mm World War II Japanese. That sounds fascinating. That sounds really great. Oh, New Fenris Railroad said he got his downloads from Real Terrain Hobbies Hobbit Houses. If you didn't see this, Real Terrain Hobbies, I mean, I've used some of his ideas. The snow, wooden scenic snow in water, straight from him. He did some beautiful stuff. I think the first one I saw was a big castle build. He built this massive castle board, and he does terrain, but he does some really nice stuff. Neil from Canada, and he learnt to model some hobbit houses, or hobbit holes. So if you are into hobbits, go check him out. They're on Kickstarter. I don't know if it's over, if you can get a late pledge in or something, but he's a great guy, and it would be great to support him if you're into hobbits. Go check him out. So let's see who uses oil paints. Tim says, I only use the oil paints for weathering, but I'm still kind of new with them. Tim, I get that. Do check out Rinaldi's Studio Press. He is very good if you want to see it. I mean, he's got loads of live streams. There's so many I've given up trying to keep up with them now, because he's just got so much content on there, and he's the master. I've got some of his books as well. So he's got some books if you want. They're great for learning. Zombie Dad also uses oils for washes. So what I've used them for mostly in the past was washes, and I used them once on a resin kit I had. It's up there. It's a Machine & Krieger 1/20th scale. And it cracked the resin when I put the oil wash on, and it slightly stressed, apparently it was plastic at that part, and I'd heard someone say if you use an oil wash on this it will probably fracture, and it fractured the leg. So I went off them for a while after that, but I'm back on them again now, so we'll see. Norm, what's coming out of the printer? Well, yep, I think that was from a while ago, so I probably said typical model railroader. I'll cover it in foliage. Okay guys, all good model railroaders do this. You do a building, it cracks. Hydrocal does that a lot. If you buy them, sometimes you drop them. I have done that. It's an awful moment when you drop a wall, or things just crack. They don't line up necessarily. The ends of the walls may not be as well moulded as they could be on some kits. Ivy, vines, bushes, trees, they were made to hide all of those problems. Downpipes, guttering downpipes, perfect for lining up on those corners where those edges you've got to line all the way down, and you could fill it and spend ages getting rid of it. Put a downpipe on it, works every time like a charm. Half of modelling is just hiding your bad points. So Stephen was supposed to be going to Glasgow with the club, had to back out. His stepson got cancer and his immune system is really weak. I daren't take a chance. I don't blame you, Stephen, and it's not worth the risk. It's so important, your health. So very, very wise to do that. Hi Anfield, glad you're with us. So Timber, I only design and print my own 176 railway stuff, but my grandson begged me, so I downloaded and printed a Doctor Who sonic screwdriver. Superb. It'd be great. There's so much choice as well, whether you go for the classic ones or whether you go for the more modern ones. A lot of choice there. Amel Belzidial. I'm always curious on such things, whether or not the kits, etc., are scaled before or after removing the studio scale itself. The X-Wings props were built at 75%. I don't know, but I presume they're scaled around a person. So this is probably the scale that a person would fit in, because all the Star Wars people seem to have the proper scale for them in real life worked out. And, you would get Luke into these. All of these are made for figures. You put a figure in them. So I'm pretty sure they will scale so that a figure fits more than anything else. Yeah, Timber does some great prints if you haven't seen them. There's old jumpers with paint stains on them most days that I'm customising. Yeah, we all do it. If I had a limited budget and time, what would I build? Oh, that's such a good question. I've always wanted to do a slice through a city. This is going to sound really bizarre. So we're talking high architectural model on top, tall building with all of the floors and everything. Ground level, you might have a railroad running elevated. If it's in New York, the High Line used to go through it, but then a subway underneath. And I'd like to have like the full section. But obviously if you're going to do it out here, to get actually stuff running rather than it be a fixed diorama, it becomes quite big. And I don't know, I'd also like to do a complete cyberpunk world, a future world. but I need a laser cutter, and that's where the unlimited money comes in. So hopefully I will get one this year. I have plans on that. But yeah, laser cutter. I keep butting my head on things where I go, oh, I'd love to do that. Better with the laser cutter. But the 3D printer's great at the moment. I'm getting almost everything done on that. Hi Edward, love your tutorials and dioramas, which are very inspiring. All the best. Thanks Ted, that's brilliant. What are we watching? Right, I probably should talk a bit more about this then. So I printed the X-Wing in Cyriotech blue, which is clear actually, this version. You can get a blue version and a clear version. I can't find the clear version at a decent price in the UK anymore, so my next lot of prints with it will be blue. But I bought it to do a Helter Skelter in clear, because that clear, I'm going to paint the Helter Skelter but then leave the bulbs as clear so that they shine through, and I'm going to light it inside. That's the theory anyway. The Helter Skelter was printed. It didn't fit on my Elegoo Mars. It wasn't tall enough. It's the 00 scale one. So this was printed on my Popoli Phenom. You would probably get this cut down into an Elegoo Mars smaller one, but you print one piece at a time. I did this in one big plate, the whole lot in one go, on my Popoli Phenom in this Cyriotech version 2 clear resin. And what I'm doing at the moment is just going through cleaning everything up. Now, when you print in resin, and actually when I'm doing filament as well, I end up with a lot of support marks and you have to clean them up. In this case, I was just going through, taking out the worst of them, but also making sure it fitted. It didn't really fit that well in places, because what I find is where you have supports, it often dimples the surface and it's not as flat as it could be. So sometimes you need to take material away to get things to work. And then once I've cleaned it up, it's just a case of gluing it. Now I actually forced all these apart, having glued them, and when I primed them, the gaps were too big, resanded them and then glued them back up again. It took me quite a while. So what I'm doing at the moment is an awful lot of 3D prep work. And I love 3D printing. I absolutely adore 3D printing. You can get things you can't get any other way. But if I could have got a 1:48 scale plastic kit for this X-Wing, I would have bought it instead, because it's sharper than you get on my 3D printer. And they go together better, especially as it would probably be a Bandai one. And Bandai do the most beautiful kits. So yeah, an awful lot of this is just tidying and cleaning at the moment, which is quite hard to see. I'm printing clear because that's what's in the printer and I'm using it up, having printed this clear Helter Skelter. But I also like it because if there's bits in the bottom, you can see them in there. So it's good for doing that. And I've got a lot to go and print soon in clear, so I might just use the last of it up on that plate. So X-Wing, says Digger, definitely. Oh, sorry, this is the X-Wing, if I just didn't say that. It's a 1:48 scale. The link to the file is down below if you've just joined. And it's off Thingiverse, so it's a free print. I like to use the free ones because, hey, I mean, I'll pay quite happily if someone's put the time and effort in. And there's stuff where I've got the free print and I found somebody has a Gumroad or a site where you can pay for the same thing. And sometimes I'll go and throw them the money because they put a lot of work and effort into it. And I think it's worth it. Being on the receiving end and putting a lot of time and effort in, it's nice for people to be rewarded for that. But if you see the back piece of the body, there's a giant hole in the middle of it, and that's because I didn't print the interior gubbins because I was doing it shut, so I thought I'll just print something at the end and put the wings on. So Stephen asked, am I the kind of person who prefers building a layout to operating it? Oh, definitely building. I've done a lot of operations in the US, and they're big into operations in the US compared to the UK, where it's not such a strict thing. You know, people do it in here, but not in the way they do it in the US. And I've been on days doing operating, and it's great fun. But to me, the first love is building. And this year, apart from the ones I've just finished off, what I'm looking for is perhaps going more down atmospheric route and a bit of fine scale railway, because I haven't done that for a while. And part of that is the Port de Norwich story, which I will tell when we're doing that on the live streams rather than now, because otherwise you'll just hear it 2 or 3 times. But I stalled on it 3 years ago and I haven't done any railway since because I'm stalled on that, and my upstairs one is a nightmare for doing videos in, and everything's halfway done but nothing's really that great. and I wouldn't do it that way now, but I don't want to get rid of it, so I'm kind of just out of love at the moment with my upstairs one. So I was doing Port de Norwich to share the railway love, but I overcomplicated the track work. Let's just leave it at that for now. Digger would like to build the Chrysler building in New York. I think you need a team to do that. That's big. And you'd also, I think, a laser cutter is what you need. And that's why I say some of the things that I look at and I go, oh, I'd like to do that, an architectural thing. I think it's just so much easier with a laser cutter. And I could outsource it. You know, I've got my baseboards being cut by Grange and Hodder in the end because I wanted a canopy over the top because I want to be able to, I don't think I'll enclose it because I want to be able to get in. Obviously, it's a railway. But I don't know. I still need to think about that. Just, it will look really atmospheric. Definitely will look very atmospheric. Marie, I do like clear prints, but if you're struggling to work out where the supports are, sometimes there's a nub every time you take a support off, and I'd left these for 2 months on the side, having printed them before I took the supports off. They're still bendy, but they were quite set. There was a few bits of resin on it that I should have taken off, and the whole lot just got left because I printed everything in like November and I'm just behind. Try and squeeze too much in. I often find putting a squirt of grey primer on helps, and I come back and redo some nubs afterwards. I didn't bother. You'll see Luke and R2 and Yoda come in. I didn't bother with Luke's back. He had some nubs on it. I was like, he's got his back to a tree. No one's ever going to see him. There is a point here where if someone's back's to a tree, why do you paint the back? Well, I painted the back, but you're never going to see it in any photo. You won't be able to get a camera in there to get behind it. So the nubs are on his back still. I'm confessing. So Captain Court ran into my channel a few weeks ago and absolutely loved your work. Very inspiring, informative. Thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoy it. And oh yeah, thanks. I think that's the limit of my Spanish, but it looks like it's a compliment. So thank you very much. Right, Andy, have you chosen a laser cutter yet? A laser cutter is in my plans this year as well, but I haven't liked any of the consumer products I've seen up to date. I think I'll end up with a base commercial. No, it depends what budget you want to spend. I looked at a Glowforge, and they wanted $1,000 to ship it here, and it was $2,000 machine. Anyway, doubled the price of the machine. I was just like, really? And then Crycutter did the thing where they tried to charge for you to use your own machine, the hardware you'd bought, because you need to use their cloud to print off it. And my mother's got a Brother Scan and Cut, and that is forever free. You can use it off a computer using apps and stuff like that, or you can just stick a USB in the side and use it. You don't ever need to go into the cloud to use it. And I was very nervous then about Glowforge with this whole, you need to go up into the cloud. There's just one button on it you press. So I was thinking about Beambox because Flux brought out the Beambox Pro. And I'm still thinking. So if anybody has a laser cutter, but the Beambox they sent loads out. So I wrote to them and said, would you give me a free one? Didn't hear anything back. So there we go. They didn't want to. But you've got to try blagging it. It really works when you're as small as me. But it was definitely, yeah, I don't know. I don't really want to go commercial because I wanted to sit on a desktop because that's the space I have for it. And the commercial ones are sort of legged and big. And so I don't know. It will probably be a Beambox Pro because it's not much bigger than the Beambox. And if you're doing buildings, you sometimes want the size, especially for bases and things. Right. I haven't. Okay. Yeah, is Lundy the American one? I think I've seen them at a show in America and they did beautiful stuff. And the people that Luke Towan used, they did some amazing stuff as well. But if anyone has suggestions for laser cutters, I suspect there's a couple of us that would be interested. So Stephen says railway modelling is like painting the Forth Bridge. It's never really truly finished. That's true. But I would, when I got to a certain stage with the layout, I probably would then just move on to something else and but then there's the whole infrastructure, and I don't want to lay track again that much as I've got upstairs. So yeah. Laser kit is expensive, yeah, £4,000 was the one I was looking at, the Beambox Pro. So that's why I haven't bought it. If I start earning, that will be why I'll be buying it. So all scale modelling. I would love to create as much as you. Making things and videos is hard work and 2 kids. If you don't mind asking, what do you do for a living? This is my living. The answer is I don't make enough of a living out of it. It doesn't pay the bills. It probably would in a year or two because it's slowly going up. But actually I didn't publish any videos for a month and my YouTube is shut down. It's partly I've got a book coming out 1st of Feb supposedly, but the last I heard the books were still in a container ship outside Port LA and they weren't due in till the 24th of Jan. What's the date today? 16th. So the books haven't landed in America yet, so I suspect it will be late. You can get it on Amazon, you can see it there. If you use my name, it's How to Build Realistic Model Railroad Scenery. There we go. I can actually remember the title of my own book. And so I spent a lot of time doing that. The one thing I got caught up too much in was doing YouTube because I wanted a base level in YouTube. So this year I'm all about writing the ebook and I am going back into employment. It's a dream job. I would have come out of it, but this not making enough money certainly isn't really much of a factor in the decision. I'd have come out anyway. It's a brilliant job. It's going to be absolutely exciting. And when it's signed on the dotted line, I will be telling everybody here. I've mentioned it to my patrons and YouTube channel members already. And it's just going to be one of the most exciting things I ever do. It's funny, I was an accountant before this, and I always thought accounting would be my first job, not my only job. And this period here has been almost like the wilderness you go through. And I feel like this is coming out the other side and it's like the lush paradise I'm coming into. It's going to be hard work, but it's going to be really fascinating and interesting. So I'm looking forward to that. There's a lot of challenges with it, and it's very creative as a role. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm still going to do this at weekends, so I'll be back to the same challenge as everybody with sort of family and kids. And the answer is when I did weekly YouTube videos, I did small videos. I broke everything down into small steps. And I never did big dioramas. You can't, when you're doing YouTube, spend that much time on them. This year, I'm going to try and keep up maybe one a month, but some of those, I'm going to put a lot in the bag at the first part of the year. But once the job comes in, it's a modelling job, so I'll be able to use things from the job in there, and I think there'll be some really exciting stuff in there as well. So you'll start seeing that on the channel too. So the short answer is, I don't know how anyone models with kids, and I struggle to get the volume that I do out with doing it full time. So worth mentioning now, I've sprayed it with Tamiya primer, the bits that you saw a second ago with the 3 measures where I tried the interior, forgot to scale it from 1/64 to 1/48 when I printed it, and then when I did scale it, measured one angle when I'd done it in 1/64 and it was the mount for 1/48, so it ended up too big. Yeah, there we go. So anyway, it worked in the end. It's just a filament print with a little notch out both ends that the wings fit into, and then I'm just gluing it all together now. Now it's quite a simple print in many ways, and you can probably on this video see the stepping on the wings, on the flat surface of the wings. They just slightly come down, and because of that it hits all the layers on the printer really badly. But yeah, primer really helps you see. You can see I filed the underneath where the sort of long pointy nose is, and that was when I saw some nubs there that I didn't see when it was clear. So having this primer on really helps. It's great. If I'd sort of filed and sanded a bit more, I probably would put another primer coat on before I painted, but I didn't bother. I just left this as the only primer coat. And I've used super glue for everything. It's just easy, and a zapper to zap it. I've gone through probably half a bottle of super glue in the last week with this and other projects that I'm doing. I've started to use 5-minute epoxy a lot more in other places, and it's really good. I don't know why it keeps going black. I went through and I edited out all the gaps, I thought, so I do apologise that it keeps going black on my screen. I see this sort of black bit coming up. So back to the chat. So Right, laser cutter, I would say go industrial. I can imagine, I could get a vent, there's a wall there I can drill a hole through. But I just can't afford the price of them. And yeah, I'm with Jerry on Skip Glowforge. I looked at things like the laser pecker. It sounds rude, I'm sorry. Anyway, but it just wasn't strong enough. What I want to be able to do is cut things as well as engrave them. And I want to be able to do 3 to 5 mil in some instances, to say some of the acrylics and things. So I just need it to be slightly more powerful than that manages. And I think 2 to 6 is a good guess. Timber, I'm looking at about 4K. And I look a lot at the reviews of them. It's just, yeah, they're not really household items yet, and that's the trouble. So Admiral Belzadiel got his laser cut off some guy named Goldfinger. More like a circular saw. Okay. Lots of tidying up on this print. Yes, but part of this is just getting it to fit as well. This is at 3 times speed. Just so you know the speeding. I just did the whole lot at 3 times, apart from the oil painting and the bit at the end. Everything's 3 times. So I spent a lot of time this week tidying this up and getting it going. And that is the thing with a 3D print with a flat object. Sometimes you need to sand some of the edges a bit just to get the layers off and things so it looks better than it is. I didn't on the wings because I was going to put weed on them, as I said. I love the cloud, says Andy Crawford, but I don't like the vendor lock-in. I am so with you on that vendor lock-in, and that's why Cry-Cut really has gone down. We've always been, I mean, I got mine off my mum, so I did choose by the Scan and Cut, but it has more options, just a more expensive machine. Monoport has a basic industrial machine around 3K US, but it's big. I don't know light object. I will have to remember that tomorrow or look back through the chat. I'll row out and get them, Kathy. Yay, Spark. I thought about the K40s, but I know I'd have to upgrade immediately, so I'm more likely to start with a K50 or equivalent. There is this point where you need to have quite a strong wattage on your laser to be able to cut through acrylic, and I want it to be able to cut acrylic for some of the things I want to be able to do. I want to be buildings, I want the windows to be there and then to paint. I also want to be able to cut wood and paper and all sorts. So yeah. Digger says it's a fantastic project, Kathy. Can't wait to see it start. I presume you mean Port de Norwich at that point, but there we go. So I think it's hard to get anything meaningful until you're willing to spend a few K. Yeah. So right, oh, painting. Now this is a tip. Because I'm painting lacquers, you can pre-mix your lacquers. One of mine had only a smidgen left in the bottle and has gone a bit dry, but they resuscitate really well. So I'm probably just going to put a splash of lacquer thinner on it. And because I do the whole bottle, it's a 1 to 1.5 thinning ratio on this brand of paint, Mr. Colour. I just do the whole bottle at one go and just thin it. And it's so much easier. As I've gone, I've now starting to build up a sort of pre-thin paint. If you don't want to thin your paint, SMS, Scale Modeler Supply, do some beautiful lacquers that are pre-thinned, really nice. Great colour shifts and things like that for some interesting effects. So I've started to pre-thin all of my lacquer paints. And I thought I'd just put it in there for a bit of excitement. But by now, when you get this on screen, I'm painting. So I started with a white, very basic white. Actually thought about, this is just to kind of put a base coat on really, because the primer is, how can I put this? The primer is a bit uneven because I've sanded it. So I put a base white coat on. But I wanted to try a technique that I've done in the past, but not done for ages. And my airbrushing is not that great. It needs a little bit of work. I'm not very, it's like, you know how you hold a pencil. I hardly hold a pencil now. An airbrush is similar. So what I decided to do was I put this white on and then I went over it with black around all the panel lines. It's a very, very common technique. It's called pre-shading. And what you do is you basically paint black over anywhere which is near the edge of a panel, where it might be darker, where there may be weathering. And the idea is when you get it, you get more, it breaks up the flat surfaces and gives them more interest, makes them look weathered. So it's, you know, it's a useful technique on flat surface ships, especially good for spaceships and things like that. So you can see I'm doing it here. It doesn't have to be, you're going to put white all over it, so it doesn't have to be great. And I'm very shaky. I haven't painted anything except white and black on this base coat at all. That's all I used. It's called super white. It's quite a bluey white. I think it probably should have been a more yellowy white for the effect with all the swamp and that. But, you know, it's fine. It's there. So a lot of black squiggling. It actually did take a full week. I started this on Monday and I finished it up yesterday, which was Saturday, and then edited the video today. So it took quite a while to get all of these layers and everything done. And some of that is waiting for paint to dry. I did leave this a full day because I was going to mask it, which you'll see later. That didn't last long, that idea. But yeah, it's a great technique, this pre-shading. Some people do post-shading. I haven't got the control to get the variation post. So anyway, just an awful lot of squiggling with black around every single layer line you can find. Right, let's have a look. I've missed a few. Right. So yeah, Andy, you do need to be able to do tech, especially if you do 3D printers that are filament. And gosh, the amount of tech I've had to learn for those. Thanks, All Scale Modelling. Good luck with the book. I hope it's a huge takeoff. So do I. I've put a year of my life into it. So let's just hope. Oh, I will have a look at your Halo Warthog. Brilliant. Halo. I played it. I mean, I didn't play over Christmas. I finished it by then. I did play the whole thing, the campaign, and it was good. It's a bit short. I was hoping they'd do some DLCs because it was quite short. Didn't take me long to finish it, but I did drop it to easy because I was fed up of taking so long to kill everything. I'm not into the killing stuff. Yeah, it's a pity Luke lives in Australia and not on the street, but we do email occasionally, you know, every now and then. And I'm sure we would manage to get a mega project if work kind of went that way. What a slick way to build a wings bar. I'm going to have to pass you on that, Andy. I've kind of missed it. My last super glue cured in the bottle. I had Gorilla super glue that I bought, and I bought 4 or 5 for the price of whatever, and they were all solid in the bottle. So I've now started to just buy Builder's cheap super glue, and I haven't looked back. This one's quite thick. I like the gel ones, and you can make the hole a bit better, but yeah, I certainly wouldn't buy some of the brand names that sit around and people have cheap. They're often cheap because they're just been sat there a long time. That's how they've got them cheap. So yeah, Builder's super glue. Haven't looked back from that. So a copyright issue is not a thing when it comes to laser printers. Sparky was asking, well, depends what you're putting on the laser printer. It's no different to 3D printing. It's what's going on it. I'm going to design my own stuff for laser printers or use free things like I do Thingiverse and all the rest. Now, none of these are getting, yes, I'm putting them on a YouTube channel, but they're not a commercial. I'm not printing them to sell. So it's not an issue. Really isn't. And it's the same with the laser. I want to do my own things. So I don't think copyright will be an issue. Mark, I haven't looked into Cry-Cut. I tried cutting on my Brother Scan and cut wood. I cut veneer with it, and if you look at it, it was my droid build. I did that back. It's okay. I've tried it on styrene. You have to cut the same thing many times. You can't get the fine detail. And I also want to be able to engrave, you know, and cut 3mm acrylic or styrene that's thicker so it's structural. They can't get through it without multiple cuts. They're just not made for it. They don't cope. And maybe Cry-Cut is better, but I don't think so. I think they're still just small knives made for cutting up to thick card, really. So you can do it with multiple cuts, but it's not as... I want to etch. I want to do Cyberpunk Neon City with loads of etch signs, and I want to do those on a laser printer. The other thing is that the one I've got, it bends slightly when you go through on the Brother Scan and Cut, so you have to tape everything down and spend a lot of time making sure it's quite rigid. So they're okay, and I do use them, and I really like having mine for the 1 or 2 things I use it for, but I'm always slightly disappointed. Once I've done the black, I will now spray white over it. So there's a lot of time going over the black with white now. I'm in two minds whether I should have put a bit more white on, because the black shows through. You don't put a thick coat of white on, you put a thin coat on, and that black still shines through. It's a pre-shading and the white is fairly translucent, and you would build up the white through layers. Because it's going over black and white, or black and grey, this is, or black and white, it just doesn't really... Actually, I think that first coat was a grey. I said it was a white, but it was a grey. It was Mr. Surfacer 1500 when I think about it. So, or Mr. Surfacer 1000. So this is white going over a black over a grey. And it's... I think I probably left a little bit too much of the pre-shading showing through. When I look at the movie, it's not that worn and dirtied in that particular manner. It's got a lot of mud on it, but it's very white panels. So I think I should have probably done a little bit more white on this one. But, you know, it's hard to know when to stop when you're doing thin layers sometimes. I think it could have done with just another thin layer over everything. There we go. So, white going over. So basically put, if you're painting something like this, my base coats were, to me, a surface grey primer. You want to start with a lacquer primer if you can, because it just sticks better. And then I'm painting lacquers, Mr. Colour, Mr. Surfacer 1000 over the top, and then black, tire black, because I couldn't find the proper black, and then and I thinned the tire black quite a bit, so it wasn't a full solid black. And this is me looking at photos. I'm back on the bench now. And then I went over it with white. Now at this point, I spent a lot of time looking at all the colours, which panels to paint. I was going to go and take them back in and paint them with the lacquer paint, because it would give a smoother finish. I spent ages masking it. A lot of time masking it. After an hour, I thought, oh, I could have painted it all by now. So I took all the masking tape off and painted it. We'll get to that in a sec. Right, so people are answering about cry cuts cutting. They don't. And a bit more on laser cutters. So John Crook says, I've never used a super glue accelerator spray and wonder if there's any pros and cons the viewers to know when it's used on certain materials like plastic and resins. Big con is it stinks, so I'm sure it's not good for you. You can, I use Rocket Blaster by, I mean you use builder's sprays normally, but if I want to just do a couple of drops, I put Rocket Blaster by Deluxe Materials in a bottle, a little thin dropper bottle, and drip it on, but it evaporates out of it so quickly. I never have a bottle to hand, and I've just bought builder's sprays because, you know, builders use a lot of super glue and spray it apparently. So I just bought 6 bottles of their spray and spray it. It goes everywhere. If you zap super glue, it will leave a white residue quite often, which you won't get if you leave it. Now I still zapped it even when I was doing a gloss coat here and I was a bit worried about it. Didn't really matter. But I find that accelerant just comes straight back off. It doesn't stay there. Doesn't leave a residue or anything. It's a very noxious substance. So that would be the problem. You probably should wear a mask, will be well ventilated. $80-watt laser. Ooh, I'm not sure. I was expecting it to have to be that much. Grawley's Lair. So Grawley's Lair is saying, I believe you're going to need at least 80-watt laser to cut through the materials you suggest. 100-watt laser would probably be better for you as you could dial back the power. I've got a K40. I've heard a lot about them and the K40 that is. I thought most wattage was about 45 and you did 2 passes to cut. So if there's a view on 1 cut versus 2 cuts, I'd be interested in hearing it. And Norm says my black squiggling works well. It does, doesn't it, actually? It's the first time I've done it on anything like this. And I was pleasantly surprised how well it worked. It brings life into the white in a way that you just don't get with a plain white coat and washes. But here you can see I gave up. I took all the masking tape off and I just hand painted it. And I use Vallejo paints because I've got them on the side. I did red on the wings, used the blocks, they're raised. So a small micro brush took off any excess where I missed, because I did it a couple of times, and if you get it while it's wet you can get it back off again, no problem. It's on to a lacquer, so it's not going to eat away. The acrylic's, not going to affect that base coat at all. And I don't mind if it's slightly splotchy, was my thought in the end, because it's in a swamp and I want a bit of weathering on it. So that's cool. Plus, there's leaves all over these ones. It goes on really nicely, this red. It's Carmine by Vallejo. I used ice yellow and a little bit of a sort of a darker yellow, I think it's dark yellow, for the yellow bits, and then blotted it off because it was too strong. It really was just too strong. And I think there was a black red. Is it black red or red black I used? I always get an itchy nose. I never get an itchy nose except when I'm sat here on a live stream, and then I spend the whole time going, oh, my nose is itching. But I put on, watch very carefully for when I put out the black red to paint that. I store my Vallejo bottles cap down because I could never get them to mix, and I stored them cap down so the ends stick out so I see the colours. Let's just say that means the sediment comes to the top, and sometimes when you squeeze, nothing comes out, so you squeeze harder and harder, and then eventually something gives way. I did it by the airbrush booth, and I found some red paint the other day on a door. I hadn't realised it got that far. I got red paint everywhere, all down me, all down my clothes, all over the floor, which is a natural limestone floor, proper stone, real stone, all over the walls, which are off-white, all over the door, everywhere. Just, it went everywhere, and a puddle in the airbrush booth. This was a similar event. Okay. Right, so back to the chat whilst I'm hand painting all of this. And sometimes you just have to admit, I prefer hand painting to masking and spray painting. I don't need a smooth finish, so hand painting works really well there. And when I paint this, you can really see those step lines I've been talking about on that 3D print. It really does show up. It's just this one panel. And if I'd thought that it was going to be an issue, it was going to show, I would have sanded them, even with all that detail. But because I know it's going to have weed on it, I didn't worry. Right. So, Sparky, just noticed your blue, very nice, M8. Oh yeah. I haven't seen the Malice Down Under Star Wars tribute movie. It's a bit more bloodthirsty than the original, and the language is a bit stronger, but it's well made. I haven't seen it at all. Thanks, Jabberwocky, who hearts my channel. Thank you so much. And yeah, I wouldn't worry about not being blue, but thanks to Digger, I need to say thanks to them every time, but Digger, Timber and Norm, who agreed to be my moderators, which is why they're talking about blue, because if you have blue name it means you're a moderator, and they're the three that go through, and if you say bad things they will delete you. They have the delete button, and it's brilliant. It's great to have them, because keeping up the chat the first time I was just like rabbit in the headlights. There was so much, and it's been more manageable since, because I've got fewer people on, which is good in some ways, but they've made such a difference that I feel I can manage it, and it helps, and they know everybody. It's brilliant. It's perfect. So you need at least 80 what I said before. Right. Timber, you and I will talk nearer the time. Kathy, so this is from Sparky. When you do get your own laser cutter, what's some of your plans for making, designing things, model trains, planes, sci-fi gaming, etc.? So I would like to do a cyberpunk city effect. Not particularly dystopian or anything. And when I say cyberpunk city, what I really mean is a neon city. Loads of neon, a night city with loads of neon. Maybe the odd alleyway. And the reason I want to have the laser cutter is to design all of the advertising hoardings and to etch them with acrylic. Did we just have the... Yeah, we just had the moment where I spilt all the paint, didn't we? Yeah. So it may even have been off camera, thankfully. Anyway, yeah, so I want to do that. That's one of the main things. But just anything from naming, if you do a nameplate for something, or you want to do... So for what I'm doing at the moment, I'm doing these Jurassic Park gates. They're the gates, and they're the frame to my rainy Jurassic Park scene, which is the next diorama up on my deck. And I would have probably done them in a laser cut and just joined them together and sprayed them, and it would have been quicker, because each print, because there's 4 corners, took 36 hours, and one failed at about 32 hours. So it's not great. So I really want them for buildings, is the short answer. I'd like to be able to use them to do flat buildings. Or when I was doing my Traveller and I wanted to do all those panels, I did them by hand, and the quality just isn't there. I can't cut straight with styrene. So I want to improve my quality of cutting, because I'm crap at cutting, by using a laser cutter for some of those things. The other thing that I really have that I'd like to do is I have an extension of the Traveller spaceport, and to change some of the items in that, to put the electronics into somewhere much better, because it's not working where they are at the moment, to redo all of that, or to do another sort of hangar bay scene. And hangar bays are a lot of repeating modular sections, and I could 3D print, but 3D prints aren't smooth, and you don't want to do flat ones on resin. It's just a waste of resin. They're made for laser cutters. There's just so many things I'd like to do that I can see a laser cutter would be useful for. One tip on painting. This isn't black that I'm painting with here, it's black grey. Never, ever would be my top tip, use white or black. Use them to mix into other colours perhaps, but when you're dry brushing, don't use white. It's too stark. Use a lighter colour of what your base coat is. Unless you're actually dry brushing onto white, perhaps. When you're doing black like this, don't use black, Mars black. Use a black grey. It's a Vallejo colour, black grey. And it's great. I use Payne's grey otherwise, which has got a very blue tint. It just gives it a little bit more of a warm look, but nothing is too black and white. Now, I picked up these Tamiya enamel washes a while ago because they've got a brush in the lid, and I'm being really lazy. This is brilliant if you want to do quick spots. I used black and dark grey on this. I didn't use that much black. This is the engine that's being done at the moment, and I used it on that because that's quite dark. But I used dark grey on everything else. Again, too much black looks too stark. The dark grey looks a lot better, and light grey can work if you're doing a pure white something. Because you're just trying to add a bit of line definition. You're not trying to do too much with this, and black is too starker contrast in my view, because this is bringing out a panel line. Well, you're trying to represent a shadow. Shadows are not pitch black on a white surface, rarely, in this kind of lighting that we're in. We're in a swamp. So I like these because they've got the very fine brush. The only thing is, quite often there is a drop of enamel wash stored in that sort of thicker bit that suddenly appears and floods your work, and I get that quite a lot. I probably should also have painted the window, but I just did it with enamel washes. I didn't want it to be pitch black, but actually it is just black in the movie with a few bits on it. So all I'm doing now is going round with black and then dark grey, adding detail into the panel lines to give it some depth. We're trying to produce in miniature what you see in real life. I haven't dry brushed this at all because it's just not what I've done. So what I've tended to do is leave the whites as the highlights from the paint, where I painted the centre of all the panels will be white because they didn't have any black on them. Everything then has black around the edges of the panels, and then the dark grey into the panel lines, just to give that effect that I want. And I used the black around the areas that had the sooty sections. Okay, what have I missed on the chats whilst that's going? Okay. Tamsin says she might give the black squiggly pre-shading a try on some MDF sci-fi buildings I've got in the queue. They would be great for that. The other thing is you can always use it vertically underneath as well for some drips on buildings, the sort of that grey shading. It's so much easier to do it under the white coat with a black than it is to do it on top with a grey. So yeah, just another way of doing it. Model minutes, what have I missed? The X-Wing so far, I built it was a 3D print. That's what you've missed. And 87s we'll have to watch later is busy, but just want to say hi and thanks, Kathy, for, well, thank you for joining. I know it's very hard to fit things in, so I do appreciate everyone's time, and thank you for coming, even if it is only for 5 minutes. Blues have the power. They do. They're more power than I do. I can never get to the chat. I struggle to keep up with reading it. Oh no, he's drunk with power. So, right. Any more questions? Do you not add a metal paintball in your paint bottle to aid mixing? I do, into my Tamiya, because they have a nice big hole. But the Vallejo ones come with a dropper cap on, and I can't get a metal ball bearing in there. I don't want to start leaving them off because I have enough problems with them coming off when I don't want them to. So, hey, I don't want to encourage them to come off. So that's why I don't on the Vallejo. But I think it would be a good idea in there. JJ Model Making. Love your work, Kathy. I've watched so many of your videos so many times, enjoying the executing footage. Brilliant. And I do follow you on Instagram, so I see what you're up to on a daily basis. And I'm enjoying watching your Star Trek builds mostly at the moment. Sparky. See, that is the problem I think I would have. Is after getting a 3D printer or a laser cutter, I think I would just be lost as to what to make that's not already been done. There's nothing wrong with making stuff that's already been done. I'm doing a Jurassic Park rain scene. I've seen that on the internet a few times. It's still my next one. Why? Because I want to do the rain element, and there's no Photoshop this time. I'd love to have a laser cutter to cut all the rain in, but I'm going to scratch it by hand. Not quite sure how yet, but there we go. Sometimes it's not about not doing stuff that's not already been done. It's about putting your take on it. It's just the way you weather it, the way you do it. The other thing that I would like to have a laser cutter for, it's great for doing surface texture on things like wood for buildings. You know, you get MDF, or yeah, I think it'll be mostly MDF because it's got no other texture. It's great for putting bricks in, putting all sorts of textures on. If you want to do pavements, you can create them on it. So it's brilliant for that. You can cut almost anything on it. So there we go. Right, you can see I spent a lot of time washing. I didn't spend much time cleaning it up, but if you leave it an hour or two till your enamel washes have dried and you're not going to pull them out, but they're still soft. You don't want to pull them out of the lines, but they're still soft. If you look here, I go over at the end with a cotton bud dipped in white spirit. White spirit because it's cheap, and that's what will make these enamel washes come off. And basically you can clean off any of the splodgy bits. Sometimes, especially along this edge here where I've got it, you will see that there's a splodgy sort of section. Sometimes it comes out into a nice gradient, sometimes it looks a bit splodgy, and just going over it afterwards can soften those hard edges around where the enamel spilled out onto flat surfaces. Right, washes are very good. Sparky, like writer's block sort of thing. I have so many projects. I don't have any problems. My problem is just getting enough time. So I think just look for something you enjoy and copy it and do it. And it doesn't really matter as long as you build something. Even if it's just a kit, buy a kit you like, just get building. And I think the block soon disappears once you get back in the habit. So Tim's favourite is Vallejo's NATO black, which is very matte, not quite black. Okay, I don't really paint with Vallejo with NATO black very much because I found black grey, but tire black is what I often use, or some of these black greys. I've actually got a rubber set from Life Colour, and they've got all these different colour blacks, and they're brilliant. It's great to have it. Okay, right. I use iPad. Okay, they're talking moderation there. Leave them to talk moderating. Sparky, I thought there was 3D printing, but I have now nearly 1,000 items in my portfolio. Tim does some great stuff, and I design everything. I mean, at the moment, I'm designing a Griffin logo for my Titanfall. This is me cleaning it up, by the way, for my Titanfall helmet that I'm doing for the cosplay I was talking about earlier. And I'm doing that in Affinity Designer. If I had a laser cutter, I'd cut it on that. I'm going to cut the masking. I've got sheet masking. I'm going to cut it on the Brother Scan and Cut. You know, it's just I have so much in my design evening to-do list for projects coming up that I just don't have enough design time to get some of the things through. That's why I'll get a print from Gambody or something and use that, because I just haven't got the time to design them. Okay, so Andy makes the point that we're all guilty of wanting certain tools, but he wants to have a purpose for a tool before he invests. And he has several structures that he's been holding off for a solution. Sometimes I get to a stage now where I'm going, oh, if I had a laser cutter, I'd do it on that. Oh, if I had a laser cutter, I'd do it on that. Oh, if I had a laser... I've done it on so many projects recently. And I have always found another solution or not done it. Sometimes I've just not done it. Anyway, back to the movie for a sec. This is acrylic rod I've cut to a floaty length, and I'm using UV resin to glue it on. I think I might have been better with an epoxy, 5-minute epoxy, but that's not quite clear, and UV resin is. It's a little bit wobbly still, and it falls over backwards. When you put the rods, and I put them on underneath the struts, so that, for my mind, that's where it would want the weight to distribute. When I put it down, it just falls over backwards. Something about the weighting on it means just that couple of mil forward means it falls over backwards. So I had to put a fourth one that wasn't under a landing strut, just under its backside to hold it up, which was just like, really? Couldn't believe it, but I did. So I ended up with 4 uprights, which does make it more stable. This isn't glued in, it's still loose, but I needed these here now because I'm going to put the weed on. What I haven't mentioned, and it should be obvious, is somewhere after the enamel's dried and before I put these on, I sprayed it with a Krylon gloss spray, and I left it a day to set up really. So this has got a gloss coat on it now. It looks wet look when you catch it in certain angles. You can see that look. And the whole point is that it's wet, it's just come out. So I wanted it to look nice and glossy. These are going on so that when I put the weed on, I can hide them with weed. So I need to put them on now because the X-Wing is up in the air. It's being floated by Yoda in. It's not where it first came out, it's now floating along. It's dripped a lot of its water. We'll probably put some resin over right at the end when I bed it in, just to tie it through, because it does look a little fluffy at the end, I think. But these are there, so when I turn over and start putting the weed on, I can hide them with the weed. Now, let's talk weed. I made some weed. That sounds wrong. I tried to make the weed sort of out of polyfibre, but it didn't hold the colour well. And polyfibre is very springy, so it was the wrong sort of zigzag shape. So I thought I'd use cotton wool. It dried too solid with the brown. So that didn't make it into the video because it's just like experiments that didn't work. And I went out to my stash and found this green polyfibre. I don't know where it's from, but it's green and it's got a little bit of grass in it, and I think I might have ripped it off from the underneath of a Gauge Master mat, a grass mat. So their old grass mats came on green polyfibre, and this is going back 10 years or so, maybe more, maybe 15 years. And they had all the grass on them, and I used that a lot in my early dioramas because I didn't have a grass, I had a puffer bottle. So for long grass, I used their dead grass, the Gauge Master one, on this mat, and it was green polyfibre, and I ripped it off because I didn't want the polyfibre. It made it a bit puffy, you know. So I ripped it off and kept it on the side. So I think that this polyfibre is the underneath of a Gauge Master grass mat. It's green anyway. Green polyfibre. You could probably use the Woodland Scenics one. I probably should have found the Woodland Scenics one. So what I did was I stretched it out so that I could glue some, this is just ground foam. It's Woodland Scenics Earth Blend ground foam. Sprayed it with Knock Landscaping Glue because that's slightly shiny when it dries. Let it dry up on the floor overnight. It's a heated floor, it's brilliant. And so now I've got some drapey bits with weed and gunk attached to them because that's what it looks like in the pictures. And I did that, and it was overnight. I didn't quite have enough though, but I used it mostly round the uprights to hide them, and from certain angles you can't see them and it does look like it's floating. It's really good. And I also used it over the top, as you can see, because that's what it looks like in the pictures. There's sort of detritus on the top and then weed hanging down. So that was the look I'm going for. I put a little bit more on than they had hanging down. In fact, I've gone a bit OTT really on the weed. And the reason I've got more on is to hide these down sort of acrylic rods, which they didn't have to hide because they were suspending it from above. I guess, and they edited out somehow the wires it was on. So it's just super glued and zapped in place around the acrylic rods. There we go. Right, so that's what I'm doing. I'm gluing this on. When I run out of the one with weed on, with the ground foam on, I went back to just using the normal bottom of the Gauge Master grass mat polyfibre. Somewhat, Admiral Belzediel, somewhat nervous to ask, did the Wexwin stay as wedges red 3? It's not got Luke's red markings. It's got different markings to that. The yellows are in a different place and the colours are different. So I don't know whose it is. I just copied the picture on the screen and painted it basically the same as the picture on the screen. Right. And Luke's is red 5. Oh, I've missed loads. Okay. Right. Let's not mention a CNC. That's not. It makes too much dust. Still putting weed on. That's all right. Yeah. I think once you buy the tools, Andy and some of the others are saying that once you buy the tools, you definitely end up using them because you've got them. But there are some tools you buy you never use. I bought a Proxon foam cutter and I haven't done many foam projects since. So for the project I bought it for, couldn't have done it without it. Really couldn't. But I haven't used it as much as I wanted for the price since then. Still gets used, but not as much as it should be. So sometimes I'm thinking I might just do a project just so I can use that. So I justify the cost of buying it. So what is the Star Marvel 76 was asking, what's the squeeze cap you're using for the black wash? It's a Tamiya black enamel or dark grey enamel wash. And it's not a squeeze cap, it's a square bottle and you dip it in and pull it across. It's just a little brush that goes into the bottle. But it comes with the brush in the lid. So that's effectively the lid of the bottle. Okay. Timber says he's not keen on filament. I'm going past Andy's CNC machines because that's a route I don't want to go down. Just something else to buy and find a place for. I wasn't keen on filament, but I've just printed a helmet. And sometimes for the big stuff, it's just too expensive to do it in resin. And resin isn't as strong as filament. So I am having to learn to love filament at the moment. But a new hot end solved most of my problems. George21 asked, what do you think will be the next advancement in model making in the next 10 to 20 years? Someone asked me that recently. And I think it will be improved 3D printing with the colour on the outside. They're there at the moment, but we're talking £60,000 machines to print, you know, the scale we want, in the detail we want, with, you know, you scan something in full colour and then just print it in full colour. I think that's where we'll go next, full colour representation. So scanning and 3D printing in colour, I think will be it. Oh, Tamsin, I'll have to definitely try popping off my Vallejo bottle novels and putting in a ball bearing because it's getting embarrassing. Have I tried, so Grawley's Layer asked, have I tried makeup brushes for dry brushing? I switch now and a convert for smoother dry brush blends. I do have a lot of makeup brushes in my mix because I'm a woman and I don't really wear that much makeup, so I donated them all. At the moment for dry brushing, I tend to use the really knackered old brushes I've got sitting around. But makeup brushes are great. I use them for applying pigments sometimes. They're very, very light. You know, the big blusher brushes are superb for that. So do definitely recommend them. And they're quite a cheap way of getting brushes sometimes. Stephen asks, when you were doing the mini spaceman, the one with the rocket reminded me of the clangers. Yeah, they were so cute. Yeah, and Andy's right when he says, so what, that someone has done something, you haven't, and we all do things differently. I did the Mandalorian figure from Gambody. Loads of people painted it and they look fairly similar. Still love doing it. I really enjoy doing that. I just love sitting there painting. It's like colour by numbers with paint. So just enjoy it. It doesn't matter if it's not original. I like to do things other people have done just to try the technique. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. Yeah, buildings is definitely the reason for a laser cutter, just because buildings have a lot of flat structures. So, Star Marvel 76 asked, enamel paint goes into those panel lines easier than acrylic. Yes, 2 reasons I would always use an enamel or an oil wash for panel lines. One, enamel washes flow better because the solvent is more less viscous. Anyway, it flows better. So an enamel white spirit will flow in a way that water just doesn't. The surface tension's lower. 2, enamel paint you can take back off again with a cotton bud, whatever brush, soaked in white spirit, and you'll take it back off. Acrylic, when they dry, really hard to get back off. So those blips where you've put it in and you've come out of the panel line are so much harder to tidy up with an acrylic wash. In fact, you can't really tidy them up easily with acrylic wash. You can grade out your enamel washes and panel lines so much better. So I would always panel line. Gundam people spray with gloss first before they panel line because it flows better. So you don't, and it is true, you don't want to panel line over a matte surface. You want to panel line over satin, or these were gloss lacquers that I've been spraying with, so it was a glossy lacquer surface. So I didn't bother spraying a gloss coat because it was gloss paint. But if you sprayed with a matte paint, your panel lines will bleed into the paint a lot more. Okay, so we've got another vote for Tamiya NATO Black. The only downside with the enamel washes is the smell, it stinks. I'm not putting it on so much, but yeah, it is, but you can't get the same effect with acrylic. And I have a lot of stinky stuff in my house, so I have a lot of ventilation going a lot of the time. Any news if there's going to be a season 3 of Great Model Railway Challenge? There's been 2 seasons, Jabberwocky, but they're not doing a third. I've not heard anything anyway. I think Channel 5 just didn't want to do it, so they didn't commission it, and then COVID hit. So I'd be surprised if it happens again, sadly, because it was great fun. And I didn't have to do the hard work that everybody else did, so it was good. Right. So where did I get to? Okay, lots of custom ideas, but getting stuff and time to do them is a pain, says Vez. I'm doing a fence prop for my model horse picks. Yeah, things take time. I spend all day modelling, all evening on the computer designing stuff, quite often now for my new job, but all the time, and it could take me months. Ahsoka I did, it took me months to do her for the Clone Wars. It's difficult. It really can take a long time. So, Norm says, just the right amount of space grime. So I decided, having got this in, that I'd put some white glue on, just because I was leaving it for the night, so it didn't need to be super glue to dry quickly or anything. And I put on some more ground foam. It's Wooden Scenics Fine Earth blend. I recommend you have the green blend and the earth blend just to hand. They're just useful everywhere in so many different ways. Right. Andy Crawford asks, is the UV resin pretty tough, or how strong compared to epoxy? It's not as strong as epoxy resin. These are not a great contact point though, are they? They're a sort of butt surface. Epoxy resin would have held them solidly. These are I knocked one and it came off because I'd already knocked it once, so it wasn't as good. I don't think it's as strong, but I would do epoxy resin. I use 5-minute epoxy for my helmet, and I've plastered it in it, and it's definitely stronger. It was my view. But UV is crystal clear, and that's why it's brilliant for water things, because it's crystal clear. So Sparky says, from the start of this project to now, really looking great. I can almost tell it's a biplane from 1941 now. Yeah, it does really get covered, doesn't it? So just loads and loads of weed going on at the moment. It's a bit fluffy actually when it's dried. It's just dried a little bit fluffy. I'm not sure what to do about that, but I think I might just put resin on there at the end and just see if it weighs it down a bit. But it's a bit of a one-way step if it doesn't. John Farrant says, we have the same problem with so it tilted back when I did it, and he has the same problem with tri-wheel aircraft. Putting weights in the nose will help resolve the problem, but during construction, the trouble is it's a hollow print, but there's only a sort of maybe 3-4 mil hole, so I'd have to get the weight in and shove it up the front, just the way, or have thought of that beforehand, which obviously I didn't. UV resin is worth having. You can use it as a glue, but it's really worth having because it's for water. If you're doing water, it's really great for that. Norm thinks the moss is very convincing. Thank you. I used cling film once on a piece of card as a dam for a resin pour, and nothing stuck to it, but it was wrinkly. That was my only problem with it. So what am I doing now? Well, I'm putting gunky enamel wash over it because it looks a bit green, and I'm also making the sides just a bit splodgy. This doesn't dry quite as stark as this. This is a MIG or AK Interactive, or maybe even Vallejo, but I think it's AK Interactive sort of streaking grind type of gunk winter one. It's just a gunky dark colour. It will dry lighter on the weed that comes down. And I also put some static grass on that was just from, pile from an old hoovered up section, to add just a bit of variety of texture here. But it darkened it down because actually the weed that's on there in the movie looks really dark. But one of the problems is it's colour graded to death, and in some shots it looks bright and in other shots it looks practically black, but so does the whole scene. So it's just about getting the colour right. I needed this to just look a bit darker, and I needed it to look a bit splotchier, so this achieved both of those. Right, what else have we got in chat while that's going? So I use UV resin with a torch, but when I'm doing a big piece, I will also get out my 3D print curing UV chamber and just put that on. That blasts a lot more UV. And what I found was I got UV resin everywhere doing the waterfall. It was the waterfall, it went everywhere. And you can put your tools on the windowsill. I mean, clean them up with isopropyl alcohol and they're still tacky. Put them on a windowsill for a day and they just go solid again with a thin layer of UV set resin. So it's actually quite a nice product to clean up that way. Right. I definitely have, I had the Green Stuff World UV resin for ages and I used it for puddles. It's quite useful. And I used it for a rainbow first, which is what I bought it for. And it is a useful thing. Right. So awesome, and thank you to Timber for translating Florando Medina's Spanish. But yeah, it's useful. My Spanish is pretty poor. No problem, Star Marvel. I've got another rain one. That is actually my diorama I'm starting. Probably not this week. I need to get the first chapter of the book done. I think I'm going to issue it in chapters and call it a course because it's quite big. So that's going to come out and that's next week. And then I'm doing I made the mistake of making it too big. It's going to be massive. Anyway, it's going to be raining on that. So I left it here overnight to drip. It just dripped. It's ruined that board. I need to get a few more of these cutting mats because I'm going through them too quickly. I got a brand new one, nice and clean. Heated something with my hot gun and it's warped. Great. Yay. So I'm not getting through all the chat quickly enough, but where have I got to? Right. So thank you, Star Marvel. I've got to experiment. I have a lot of resins around because of my resin printer. Yeah, I find that the UV resin that you buy to set is for nails. This is just another coat of gloss going on so that the enamel's dried overnight and I put this gloss on. It's a Krylon gloss just to make sure that they don't look anything too flat because they've just come out of the water. It beads and I did tamp some of the stuff down a bit, but it made it look quite fluffy. I think it showed that it was fluffy at this point. But anyway, that's now sat. It's on the side over here actually. And It does look a bit fluffy. I may have to revisit that fluffiness at some point, but I'm not quite sure how. So it's just sitting there for now. Okay, powder printers, definitely. Andy Crawford said they're incredible, but so very pricey. Not having to support your model. I mean, it's just an amazing concept. Excalibur says he found me from the Mandalorian figure. I ended up printing and painting my own at 200%. It was a great model to print, isn't it? It was really fun. And great to do. So let's keep going. I remember when you did the Traveller Spaceport, you had to reduce the scale. I think full scale it would have been almost film studio scale. I think it would have been. It would have been. So back to what's happening on the movie for a second. As you can see, it's R2. I hollowed him out, but decided, I'm sorry, not to light him. I just thought you wouldn't be able to see him. When I put him in the scene, he's mostly blocked by the X-Wing, so you don't really see him. And I was just like, it's too much hassle. So I sprayed them with a white Vallejo spray primer and didn't really do much cleanup, really, at all. I did a bit of cleanup, snipped them, bit of sanding. And there's Yoda, R2-D2 and Luke to paint. Luke is in the same clothing. Did you get this? He wore these clothing in Hoth. It's like undersuit. And then he wore it in Dagobah for this entire time. And then he went to Bespin in it. Someone on the internet said Darth Vader probably smelt him coming. And he probably did. He must have stunk. So anyway, Vallejo paints. Again, quite thin. I have the same technique mostly all the time. It's a base coat. I paint in some highlights in some thinner paint, and then I put a wash on. I decided that I would hand paint R2-D2. I know he's a droid and he's full of sharp lines, but I couldn't mask it particularly. It was really fine to see the detail on the print. So you see all the nubs on there on his back. For Luke, I just went, oh, you're not going to see that. I should have cleaned them up already, but I haven't. He was also a bit dark, so he's going lighter now because his colour is actually a bit sandier. I think Yoda's also a bit dark and gets lighter again in a minute. So yes, just plenty of little people painting for a minute or two. Tamsin said diluted gloss Mod Podge to give the vegetation a wet look. I think that's a really good shout, and it probably will be what happens. I got it to here and I was just going to sit on it a bit and see what I thought. I like that idea though. I knew you guys would know the answer if I asked you, so that's really good. So Human City Junction says Human City Junction. Do you still consider a model railroader, or are you moving more into modelling and diorama building? So I am a model railroader, but I haven't done any for 2 years, and Port Denoit will be my step back into model railways again. It's a time thing. I'm trying to do a video a month for YouTube, plus do other stuff as well. I haven't got the model railroads don't advance quick enough. So I decided the way to get the model railroading content back in was something like the live stream, where it can take longer. So I can spend a year doing something on a live stream. And if one whole session is on, oh, I laid the track and assembled the baseboards, it's only one session. But on a YouTube video, I haven't got the time to do it because I want to get on and do things. If I'm writing books on scenery, not track. There's just too much on the model railway that is not really exciting enough viewing, that takes too long for the schedule that I have. I just won't get it done in time. And that's where I got to on what I want to do. And I like short attention span projects. It suits me better. So it's not that I don't like model railways, it's just that my attention span is shorter than perhaps I have time for at the moment. But it's still up in my loft. It's not going anywhere. So Jabberwocky asks, what kind of displays do you prefer for your dioramas? I.e. open shelves, glass cabinets, other ideas? They're mostly on open shelves. I don't have any glass cabinets. I would probably put them in glass cabinets if I had them, but I don't. So they're just in open shelves. And that's, you know, it's just the way it is. Glass cabinets are better. But they're quite big. You know, I've got the shelving in here. I've got 3 bookcases upstairs full, and they're just now stacking up on the lounge floor. And I should have done Jurassic Park at half the size, because I've got a sort of The T-Rex is 40 centimetres long, and it hadn't clicked when I printed it. I printed it at such a large scale. And I'm looking at it going, but that means everything needs to be A3, and it's square. It's just massive. It's just like too big. So I don't know where it's going to go. Oh, it's so hard. You produce this much stuff, it just ends up. And I don't want my house to be totally full that I can't get in the front door. Anyway, watch this space. Heath Railway coming up very soon, says Digger. Yeah, there'll be a railway in March starting on this channel, on the live streams, so you'll see it then. We'll talk a lot about it then and why it stalled. There's a real learning point there about railways and skill sets and interests and why it stalled for 3 years. So Human City asks, how did Digger become a moderator? He volunteered, that's all it took. Tim, thanks for coming on, and I'll see you next time. Mark, Mark Rogerson asks, have I ever tried a technique that went horribly wrong? Well, I mentioned the 2 weeds on this. I am not joking. I did a road for the book, and the first 3 went in the bin. 3 went in the bin. You just don't bother putting it on videos because it's a waste of time to put it on and then go, and this just went in the bin. Port de Norwich is probably my biggest technique that didn't work. The skip's been emptied now. That was in my neighbour's skip. So yes, I make a lot of mistakes. That's how I learn, by making mistakes. And then I share them with you so you don't have to make the same mistakes. I share what works. But trust me, if you're going to model a lot, you will eventually end up getting it wrong. You just can't do anything else. Yeah. So Tamsin said, Second Dynasty, they're the people who did the Traveller ship, and I love some of his designs. It's just so great. I'm going to do a hanger version of something eventually, I think. They're doing 1/270th scale versions of a range of Traveller ships. Maybe I could do a whole spaceport full of them. I thought about it, and I know the designer, Ben, has said that if I want to, I can have any of his whatever's to do. And I think I might do a hanger with them instead. But 1/270 inching, the scale for Travellers, I've done a 15mm, which is about 1/100. So I reckon I could put my 100th scale master grade Gundam on there. And 100th scale. So I think I'm going to have to sort of have a 100th scale. So 1/270 is a bit small, but on the other hand, you could do a great diorama with that much on. So yeah. Right. Yeah, Digger, I'm sure he stank. That swamp looks awful. And I don't think they had automatic deodorants because it's green and black in places. So hi to Kyle, who's just rolled in. So Stephen Cameron says, my dad was an aero modeller, although he did other stuff as well. My granddad was a railway enthusiast, so it's in your blood. I think it's important to have all these different scales. It's good to have variety. It brings a bit of interest to the modelling. And I've been doing my portfolio recently. It's up on my website now. And I went back through all my modelling back to 2003, 2004 when I start having photos. And there's not a lot for 3 or 4 years after that. But I think it's because there was a lot of baseboard work with not a lot of great photos, so I didn't bother putting any up. And the one thing I realise when I look back is that I've got as much sci-fi as railway, and probably more in the photos. And the reason for that is a lot of the railway stuff looks boring. I've got a whole lot full of baseboards and other stuff on top of it. It just doesn't take a great photo, so you don't put it out there. And doing small dioramas means I can get something with a photo much quicker. So when you get onto my small diorama years, sort of the 2020s, you can see just my volume goes up because I'm doing much smaller stuff and a lot more of it. So it's about what is it you want to do. For me, I need to have finished products. Otherwise, the railway would be much higher up the priority list, but I just can't finish a product in the time. There we go. I used the Molotov chrome pen to do his lightsaber because I thought, well, that should be shiny. It's a great pen to have, that chrome. It is really good. It doesn't do long, flat sections, like a shield or something, particularly smoothly. But it does do a great gloss look. And the reason the paint's not sticking to his feet is I have blue tack on there. And even though I put the primer on, it just doesn't seem to want to stick. So, right. And Human City says, it's really great seeing you here doing live streams. Do you have a regular streaming schedule? I do. Also, I agree with short attention space projects, modules, shelf layouts. Yeah, I came to that realisation about myself that my attention span on a project, I love the designing more than the building almost. So if I have something that takes too long to build, I don't finish it and it gets shelved because it took too long and I want to design the next thing. And I have loads of projects where I've gone, I enjoy designing that. I don't actually need to build it now. The design was enough. Had a whole orrery worked out. And I got a card one, got halfway through building it and it was warping really badly. And just went, okay, it's on the side still. I had a whole planet, solar system orrery, thing worked out with all the cogs and everything. So all worked out. Loved working the maths out on all of the cog ratios, the gearing ratios. Don't feel the need to build it at the moment. I may come back to it because I love the concept of orrery and I bought the planets for it. So I've got a set of all the planets in both log and normal scale. If you do them in normal scale though, some of them are like grains of sand and others are like melons. So a log scale kind of sorts that out a bit. But yeah, it's just, that's the bit I like. So I recognise that about myself now, that I will never do anything other than a micro layout again, probably. And that my loft layout is probably never going to get finished. But I need to actually translate that into practical because, yeah, you just have to know yourself, don't you? So what is my regular streaming schedule? So I think it will be the second Sunday of the month. But I'm not sure whether this is the second Sunday because January is weird. I'm not sure. At the 16th, it's probably the third Sunday, but that was January. So it should be the second Sunday of the month. And then I will put out my video for the month because I'm going to drop down to monthly with the job coming up, see how it goes. I'll put that video out on the last week of the month probably. Obviously some months have 5 weeks, which is confusing, but I'll do it as a second Sunday of the month. So at least I know then when it is. So I probably could put the schedule out now. Work them all out and put the schedule out. You just have to check I'm not away or anything across any of them. But yeah, it's the second Sunday of the month. I thought second Sunday had a ring to it, so people might remember it a bit better. So bye, Stephen. Have a great night. And he's probably gone by the time I get around to reading this. But hi, Gareth. Doing well. I never get through my can, and then I drink all this caffeine just before I go to bed, so I hum. And I have an 8 o'clock call with Japan tomorrow. That is going to be fun. The time zones are great. Oh, onto washes. Now, these are my painter washes because they're nice and thick for putting sort of into these flat areas. So I've done a base coat, I've done some highlighting, and I'm just doing a wash. For this type of detailed model that's this high, that's all I'll ever do. I'm not a figure painter. I'm a modeler, a diorama modeler. So these are supporting actors to the diorama, and he's right at the back, and he looks a bit drunk if you see the pictures in a minute, because I haven't glued him in yet. I won't do that till after I put the water in. But yeah, literally, and then I dirtied him up a bit with some more washes and green paint and stuff, because he had that manky suit on. Now for R2, I didn't think these thicker washes would work as well. So I used a Tamiya enamel wash because he's got very fine lines on the print because it's shrunk down from quite a large one. And so you have to pick your washes. These are acrylic washes, they dry really quickly and they're great for these types of figures and flat surface areas. Army painted washes, flesh wash on the face, strong or dark, strong wash I think it is on the rest of it. But I put a coat onto him with these particular washes, the sort of acrylic ones, to make sure he wasn't stark white because he's been in that swamp and he looks really dirty. And I probably could dirty him up a bit more, and I may do that, which is why he's not glued in either. But it wasn't sitting into the gaps enough. It's a thicker wash. So I used the enamel wash after this because it dried so quickly to bring out the details that are in the print but are just not visible when it's all white. There we go. Yoda. his face is olive green with white effectively, and a hint of blue in it just to desaturate it slightly. But yeah, he's a pale green. Great guy. Right. Oh, I missed on chat. Washes are great for figures. I totally agree, Norm. Bob Busking says I should consider a T-track style layout. The small modules are really more small dioramas that connect together to form a layout. I would consider it. I've got so much stuff in 00, and Port de Nord I bought new stuff for, and that's 009 as well. I had a load of Owen 13 looking through my photos today for the older stuff, and a lot of it was Owen 13. I was like, I loved Owen 13. I was like, Kathy, I haven't got the space. Here's the enamel wash going on. You haven't got the space. That's why you came away from it. I sold it all to stop my temptation of doing it again. But I love Owen 30 as a scale and a style. But I think if I get the laser cutter and I'm doing more buildings, T-track would be good for that, especially if I did Japan or somewhere like that, because that has a lot of sort of T-scale, doesn't it, that you can get. Gareth says, it seems ages since me and my son met you at Worley in 2019 now, Kathy. Thanks again for taking a picture with us. Oh, it was brilliant, but I mean, I talked to so many people at that Worley because it was right off the back of the Great Model Railway Challenge. It was just a brilliant, brilliant show. And probably the last time I went to a railway show. It's that sad. I didn't manage any in March 2020 or in January, February either. And then it was gone. Yeah, Norm reminds me R2-D2 was swallowed by the swamp creature that was spat out. He is very gunky. So now this is a little out of sync. I wonder why I didn't have the cutting of the acrylic rods, but I must have sorted my video incorrectly because I moved the people to the end because they were obviously painted in between other things while I was hand painting. So here's the picture of me cutting the acrylic rod that you've seen attached to the X-Wing. I'll sort that in the main video. So yeah, there we go. I discovered that if you go halfway through, you can snap them, which is good. So here we are, the final pictures of the scene, heavily colour graded into the blues that they have. And all that remains is to straighten Luke up and put him in, because he looks quite drunk there, doesn't he? All that remains really now is to put the water in, put the backdrops on, put the water in, and sort some fog out. And I'm doing fog experiments next week. I've got 3 different types of fog experiment planned. One is a fog machine, which I do own already. It's a bit excessive, but it's great. But it will put a greasy residue over them over time. 2 is a little water micro diffuser. And I bought one that's just like electronic, but another one that's in a little ceramic pot, which is also electronic, but looks a bit fancier. So I might see how they go. And then the third one, which I've got to jury rig, is to turn a vape, and I don't vape, but to turn a vape into something, they do it a lot in cosplay, that shoots out smoke. And I'm not going to fix it into this diorama. It's going to be something I keep then for use in other places, and I could then use it on Port de Norwich is the idea, because that's going to have some misty drizzle stuff going on. So here we go. And that was it. Back to me full screen. Ooh, scary. So that was Dagobah so far. You can see I just need to sort the fluffiness, let's go with that term, the sponginess of the weed out a little, so it looks a little blasted. And I like the idea of perhaps putting some gloss Mod Podge on and just pushing it all down a bit and letting it dry up. We'll just see how it goes, but I like that idea, so that's a good one, Tamsin, thank you. But other than that, it's got some resin to go in. I'm going to use the slow 72-hour one. Well, actually, no, I've got another one that's quicker, it's 8-hour, that will do this depth and set a bit quicker. The longer you leave it, the more likely you are to get dust in. And I've got some colouring, so I can put in, you need to put some white in or it becomes too thin, but you put some white and some green, and maybe even some black, just to get it to the right colour. And I'll pour that, and maybe yellow just to yellow it up a bit, and a bit of brown. We'll see. It will end up as a really sludgy colour. And before I put that in, I will glue in, using the UV resin, the uprights for the acrylic rods. So that's where I'm coming on that. and then they'll pour the water with those there, and the weed will then trail into the water slightly. And that's it then, it's more or less done, apart from the final photos. So that will be next time's live stream, because I'll finish this off, do the final photos, and then I'm going to put it out on May the 4th as the a recut edited version in about 10 minutes for everybody who doesn't want to sit through all the live streams, and tell them they can sit through the live streams if they want to find more details out. Just, you know, for the main YouTube viewer type experience. So you'll be able to see it all again, but in about 10 to 15 minutes, which is, you know, relive the glory days of the live stream. So, right, what have I missed in chat? So Choppy Socks asked, what's my new job? Is it model related? It will be model related, and it is very creative. I'm not saying any more until it's signed on the dotted line, but I will, when it is, I'll be telling you all about it, because I'll be so excited, and you'll see a lot of it on the channel, so you will see a lot more of it, and it's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to it. Norm says it's beautiful. Thank you, Norm. Timber says you need a clamp-on vise or at least a mitre block. I do have a clamp-on vise somewhere, but it's so big for these. Yeah, and I used to have a mitre block, but I cut it with something, and it's not very mitred anymore. But I had an aluminium one. We should get it. I think I actually hacksawed through it, so I keep going down the wrong channel now. But Tamsin, thank you very much. Cosy 11 8 BMK, thank you. So yeah, thank guys. It needs a bit of work still. It's you know, it's there. It's just a bit bouncy, but I'm really pleased how it came out, and it took quite a while, the X-wing, longer than I thought it would. Painting often does, and weathering and adding everything. There's a lot to it. It takes a while to do a 3D print looking good sometimes if there's a load of support, but definitely worth it, and it's big, so it's got to look good. Gareth says he's talking about Wall-E 2019, and that it was his last event. He was so looking forward to it in 2020, then the world was pear-shaped. I did see a lot of people that weekend, Gareth, but you know, it was still great to meet everybody, and you know, it's great. Thanks to everybody saying it looks good. Thank you. It's always good to get nice feedback. Norm's definitely looking forward to the water and the fog. Sparky says fog machine, he just uses a water diffuser, no harm when it goes empty. My worry about putting a lot of water in is that it starts making, so if I use a gloss medium on the water to add the waves on, something like Mod Podge, if you add a lot of water, sometimes they go white again. So my worry is that it will make the water go white if I use it a lot. So I'm going to try and see if that's an issue. But I'll be using this as the test bed for it. Gareth says, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I even have a Yoda tattoo on my leg. Wow, that is a huge fan. I wouldn't want a tattoo anyway in case I then fell out of love with whatever I'd had tattooed. You know, I said short attention span projects. I just want something else. But yeah, no, he's a great inspiration, isn't he, Yoda? So Bob Bisking saying T-track models can use any scale. N and HO are popular in the US, but there's no reason 00 can be used. The standard size models 1 or 2 foot in size makes it easy. Oh right, I was thinking of T scale, or whatever scale I was thinking of. TT scale. I was on TT scale. Sorry, totally missing it. Yeah, I already have a lot of 00 and HO, so that's the scale I stay on because I'm heavily invested into all the buildings, all of the accessories, everything that goes with it, and track and everything as well. Tamsin says there's a company that has adapted vape mechanisms for model smoke generators. Can't remember the name of it. I've seen a few. There's Cosclouds or something like that, and they do it for cosplay. And Kamui Cosplay have a video on their YouTube channel on how to do it. So I'm just going to follow their video. It involves dremeling. I mean, she dremels, I'll just drill because, you know, I'm not a cosplayer. I do have a Dremel, but I would always use a drill instead. You drill through the side and put a different, just a bigger kind of feeder for the liquid in. But then you put because you're not sucking a vape, and that's what causes it. You have to put a fan on it. So I've got the fan already. I've got the whole thing I bought years ago because I'm going to do a puffing Billy coffee, well, maybe steaming coffee, but originally the Marlboro Man puffing smoke billboard, but then I thought maybe it was not PC enough, who knows, to have smoke puffing smoke. Who knows? Anyway, so someone suggested steaming coffee. So I was going to do a billboard like they used to have in Times Square with the smoke coming out of it. So I bought all the stuff for that, and it's definitely there, but you have to put a fan on just to force the vape through, apparently. So Sparky says use a funnel and straws to send the fog where you need it. I think the idea if I do a vape is that it will have that. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I saw someone once who had a whole layout with a big fog generator, I can't remember what it was, at the bottom, and every single chimney and boat and everything just had smoke coming out. It's really well done. Sparky's asking May the 4th, why that date? Well, I did a May the 4th Clone Wars video last year. And the trouble is there's actually a lot of Star Wars content out on May the 4th, so nobody really watches it then. And it didn't pick up till July, the Clone Wars one. But it's just a principle. I'll probably get it out on May the 4th, around that date. Thanks, Alistair. It's nice to have people who appreciate it, because I would say my viewing numbers on YouTube aren't great at the moment, so it's nice to get positive feedback. Yep, Choppy Socks, my job is exciting, and you'll definitely see more of it on the channel. And thank you for coming to the live stream. So Nap Audio. What would you recommend somebody who never built anything before to get started? Ooh. What's your interest? Is it railways? Is it sci-fi? I'd just start with a kit. I'd start with a kit with great instructions. If it's a railway, because start with either a rolling stock kit or a building kit. And then someone's done all the hard work working it out. They'll tell you what colours to paint it, especially if you get a kit with good instructions. And you can just have the fun of building something up and making it and enjoying and getting in with something that is relatively gateway entry. So choose a good kit. There's loads of them out there. That's almost all done. All you have to do is assemble it and paint it, and then you'll get your feel for it. And you can do that with more basic tools as well. It's mostly just glue, knives, cutting mats, sanding to like an emery board to take off any nubs if you've got a plastic kit, and to level things out, and then just paintbrushes and paint. And you can use artist acrylic, it's not a problem. So that would be my tip. Start with something where someone's done all the hard work and you're just assembling it and learning some physical skills with your hands, because it takes a while to get your hands into the practice. If I haven't modelled for a while, then I'm not as good on the fine detail. Fine painting, is a skill that you acquire by practice. So just have a go at something like that. Bendy straws. Interesting. I presume that's for the fog still. So vape coils to smoke. I'm going to have to check you out, Timber, then. I'll have a look. Rock Rogerson, interesting point with water vapour for your fog. I wondered if the new smoke generators in the Hornby locos would affect scenery. What are the new smoke generators putting out? Are they putting out a liquid? Normally it's a glycerine based or a petroleum based product, and over time they will, I'm not going to put a huge amount out, they will put something out and a fine film over your scenery. Realistically, are you going to run them enough that that's an issue? But if you feel it when you put it in there, because I've got one that I've got for a chimney or something, is an oily feel to it, and that will end up everywhere. I think you'd have to run it a lot before it becomes a big issue, and it depends how good your ventilation is in the area that you're doing it. I've got a scented, I think it's Deluxe Materials, coal and smoke smell one. It's, if you have good ventilation and you extract well, you won't have as much settling, but you will get some, I think is the idea. Certainly if you use a fog machine, which has a lot more output, you will. Wayne's Workshop. Okay, let's have a look for that. Tamsin. Mark Rogerson, they're ultrasonic and use water. Yeah, I've got one of those to try, and it's actually very small. And I've got the electronic, just the raw electronics one, and they're very small. It's just a small little plate that vibrates. I had a really old one that was about this big, and it's somewhere safe upstairs in the loft. But these new ones are, a little bit of PC board, but it's about this big. It's really to hold the water, so they're really neat. And you get them for reptiles as well. Reptile terrariums have a lot of misting happening, so that's a good place to go look for them. Oh, and I've gone past my time. 10:03. I've gone past. So let me just check if there's anything else. I'm not going to get down all of them, I'm afraid. I think water will cause damage on a lot of my scenery, so I'm not going to put a huge amount out. Yeah, so we'll talk more about fog. I'm going to do a video on it. We'll talk more about it next time. And so, quick answers to the questions. If I couldn't model HO anymore, what would I switch to? Larger. I like bigger. I like detail, so I would always go bigger. Probably do O, or S is a nice size, 164. I am worried water would soften my glues because I use white glue a lot. If I print models for my double O gaze layout, I have to scale them down by 75%. Do you have a way of scaling them down correctly? I do it on my 3D print software if I want to scale down, so I just literally scale them down on there. I don't know that's the best way because sometimes you end up with thin walls, but that's how I do it. And that's it. So guys, enjoy your smokes, generators of whatever sort you have over the following week. I'll talk about fog in the future, and I'll see you next month for the continuation, the final part of the Dagobah swamp, water and fog. So see you then. Have a great week. Thank you all for coming. It means a lot, and enjoy your week ahead. I hope you get some modelling in. Take care. See you all soon. Right, now I've got to find the button to end the stream. Oops. Click. Click. End. There we go.